Today we're going to discuss the ratification of the Constitution. Ratification is a fancy way of saying the passage of the Constitution or the approval of the Constitution. So we've talked about how America declared independence, we've talked about the Constitutional Convention, the process that went into writing the Constitution, some of the great debates that took place, some of the constant debates on what the system should look like. Now we've got the system, now we've got the Constitution, but that doesn't mean it becomes law. That doesn't mean it becomes approved. So the next step is to talk about how do we convince people to approve the Constitution of the United States. So our goal for today, to compare and contrast the goals and rationale of the Federalists and Anti-Federalists. So if we're talking about ratification, as you may note, there are basically three things that we need to consider. Is the new Constitution going to maintain our Republican form of government? We talked about this a little bit. Key to the United States was a different form of government. Is this Constitution going to hold up the status quo? Will we still have a Republican government? Would the federal government have too much power? Again, we've got this debate over whether the power should lie in the national government or whether the power should lie with the states. And finally, there's the question over a Bill of Rights. There's a big debate over whether or not we need a Bill of Rights, and we'll discuss that more when we talk about the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. So, on the one side, we've got the Federalists. The Federalists are people who want the Constitution to pass exactly as it is written. They are the people who don't like the Articles of Confederation. They think the Articles of Confederation don't give enough power to the national government. So what they want to do is create a national government that's got more power. They want to create a strong national government. So they believe by passing the Constitution as it's written would do exactly that. The Federalists, again, they wanted the Constitution exactly as it's written without a Bill of Rights. In order to try to convince people of this, they wrote what were known as the Federalist Papers. Today, when you buy the Federalist Papers, you can buy a giant book and it's got all of them combined, but really what they were at the time, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay would write newspaper articles. The debate that used to take place back in the day was in the newspapers. And so they would write these 2, 3, 5, 15-page newspaper articles convincing people, try to convince people that the Constitution was worthwhile and that the Constitution needed to be passed. Today, again, we put these together in one giant collection. It's a really big book known as the Federalist Papers, but at the time, just understand it was an ongoing debate that lasted months throughout local newspapers across the United States. On the other side, of course, there are the Anti-Federalists, and they too came up with their own set of papers to try to convince people to oppose the ratification of the Constitution. Now, unlike the Federalists, who were all kind of on the same page that they wanted a strong central government, the Anti-Federalists have a lot of different opposition to the Constitution. They're not a very unified group. Some people don't like the Constitution for one reason, some people don't like it for another. At the end of the day, they all don't like it, but for different reasons. So one of the reasons, and one of the major reasons, is these were the people who believed in states' rights. They thought that the national government would have too much power. They thought that that didn't work very well with the king. The last thing they wanted to do was go back to that sort of system. They were also worried that the Constitution didn't include a Bill of Rights. They thought that the Constitution needed to list out the rights of the people because, well, that was the whole reason why the American Revolution was fought. So these people, the Anti-Federalists, want a Bill of Rights. Now the counter, if you want to hear the Federalist argument, the Federalists say we don't need a Bill of Rights. They say if you try to list out every single right, it would become long, it would become cumbersome, it is just not possible to list everything out. It would become confusing to the people. And if you did list everything out, their next main concern would be, well, what if you forgot something? Would that imply that those rights aren't protected? Or would those rights be protected? And so the Federalists said, oh, we just shouldn't even talk about it, period. We know what everybody's rights are. We know what should be protected. Let's not even discuss this. Of course, that didn't sit well with the Anti-Federalists. Some of the Anti-Federalists, again, believed in states' rights. They thought that the United States government really wasn't meant to be a big, strong national government. They thought the United States government should function more at the state level, that smaller communities were a better way to control the government. Many people today might argue the same thing. They also argued that under the Constitution, the executive branch, the president essentially, was given too much power, and there wasn't enough separation of powers and checks and balances in the Constitution the way it was written. They also had an opposition to an army during peacetime. They said, well, what do we need an army for if we're not actually at war, if we're not going to war? And so that was another major issue. So what we're going to do next, I want you to identify whether you think the following quotes were said by a Federalist or an Anti-Federalist. So quote number 1, I do not conceive we can exist long as a nation without having a power which will pervade the whole Union. Was that A, Federalist, or B, an Anti-Federalist? 2, the state declarations of rights are not repealed by this Constitution, and being in force are sufficient. A, Federalist, B, Anti-Federalist. 3, the laws of the general government being paramount to the laws and constitutions of the several states, the Declaration of Rights in the separate states are no security. A, Federalist, B, Anti-Federalist. The vigor of government is essential to the security of liberty. A, Federalist, B, Anti-Federalist. 5. State legislatures have no security for the powers now presumed to remain with them or the people for their rights. A, Federalist, B, Anti-Federalist. 6. There is no declaration of any kind for preserving the liberty of the press, the trial by jury in civil causes, nor against the danger of standing armies of peacetime. A, Federalist, B, Anti-Federalist. 7. Repeated violations of these attachment barriers have been committed by overbearing majorities in every state. A, Federalist, B, Anti-Federalist. 8. A Bill of Rights is what the people are entitled to against every government on earth, general or particular, and what no just government should rescue or rest on interference. A, Federalist, B, Anti-Federalist. All right, well, now that we've done that, in our next lesson, we'll explore exactly what the Bill of Rights were. So we know that the Federalists didn't want a Bill of Rights. We know that the Anti-Federalists did. But exactly what do we mean when we talk about Bill of Rights? And so our next lesson will focus on those specific rights found in the United States Bill of Rights. So, of course, that's kind of a preview that maybe the Anti-Federalists got some of what they wanted. But more on that later. For now, I bid you farewell.